but let's dive in. It's really quite something. Just days, literally days after Elon Musk leaves the Trump administration, you have one of the world's richest people and the President of the United States in this just spectacular, very public feud. It's all happening right out in the open. And the sources we're looking at today, they suggest this is, well, it's more than just a personal spat playing out online.
Oh, absolutely. It looks like a clash with potentially huge implications. Political, economic, maybe even shaking up how government itself functions in the U.S.
Exactly. It's a relationship that just transformed incredibly fast. First, into what looked like this really deep alliance almost.
Yeah.
Intertwined.
Yeah, symbiotic almost. And now fracturing just as dramatically and so publicly. And the fallout, I mean, the material you've shared really documents it meticulously. It touches on so many powerful forces, institutions.
Right. So for this deep dive, our mission is pretty clear. We're going to unpack this sudden, really sharp breakup between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. We'll zero in on the key moments that define their bond. The reasons they say it fell apart, the tensions may be lurking underneath all along.
Right, the underlying stuff.
Yeah, and the potential consequences, the fallout we're already seeing play out. And importantly, we're doing this drawing only from the material you've given us. It's like your shortcut, really, to grasp what's genuinely important in this story as it unfolds so quickly.
And based on those sources, it looks like things really properly boiled over around June 5th, 2025. But like you said, the material is clear. The tensions they'd been building for quite a while before that.
Definitely. So yeah, to really get the breakup, we kind of need to get the relationship first. Let's set the scene, look at how this, well, pretty unlikely alliance between Trump and Musk even got started.
Well, looking at the origin story here, the sources, they actually paint a picture starting with distance. Even, public criticism from Musk towards Trump during his first term. It wasn't like an immediate hug fest or anything.
Which is interesting, right? Considering where it ended up. What were some specific examples of that early distance?
Well, a key one the sources point to is Musk actually resigning from White House advisory councils. That was way back in 2017.
Okay.
And it was specifically after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah.
Musk publicly disagreed with that quite strongly.
Right.
So that initial period really highlighted how different their public images were. You had Musk, the sort of futuristic Silicon Valley libertarian type, focused on climate tech, global stuff.
Yeah.
And then Trump positioning himself more as this Rust Belt messiah, focused on traditional industries, borders. Not exactly an obvious pairing from the get-go, like you said.
So initial distance, even some friction there. What changed? Because something clearly did change.
Yeah.
The sources point to a big turning point around July 2024.
Yes, exactly. This is where the narrative just shifts dramatically, according to the material we have. It was after that attempt on Trump's life on the campaign trail. The sources show a really sudden, very public change in Musk's stance towards Trump.
And it wasn't just like a quiet rethink. It was a full-on embrace, wasn't it? He publicly, repeatedly endorsed Trump.
Oh, totally. And the support, it went way beyond just saying, I support this guy. The sources really hammer this point. Musk became the single largest donor to the Republican campaign.
Wow.
We're talking nearly $300 million.
$300 million?
Yeah. That kind of money, it just fundamentally changes the dynamic, doesn't it, between a politician and a private citizen. It moves into this realm of, well, deep influence.
$300 million. That's just, yeah, it's staggering. And the sources indicate this wasn't just about cash, right? This moment, it marked a really deep integration, pulling Musk right into the Trump orbit, and that had wider effects.
It really did. Sources actually credit Musk with helping bridge a gap, enabling a whole wave of tech bros, figures from the tech world to align with Trump, which, hadn't always been a natural fit before.
Right.
And the material also connects Musk to helping sort of realize an intellectual blueprint linked with Curtis Yarvin.
Ah, Curtis Yarvin.
Yeah.
Often mentioned in connection with the new right, neo-reactionary thought. What do the sources say about that link? Why is it significant here?
Well, the sources describe Yarvin's thinking as, favoring really strong executive power, a sort of technocratic elite running things, and having this real contempt for traditional democratic institutions.
Okay.
And this perspective, according to the material, it kind of resonated with Musk's own growing frustration with bureaucracy, with traditional government. So beyond the public show, there might have been this ideological alignment happening too, which helped Musk embrace Trump's, let's say, disruptive style of governance.
So a mix of things then. Political alignment, maybe some ideological overlap, and just massive financial backing. Were there other, maybe more concrete points of support or mutual interest mentioned in the sources during this alliance phase?
Oh, definitely. The sources bring up SpaceX's Starlink, for instance. During the campaign and then early in the administration, Starlink got a lot of praise, especially for its potential in rural areas bringing reliable internet. And that lined up really nicely with Trump's second-term promises about infrastructure, closing that digital divide. So it was a clear example where Musk's business could be framed as directly supporting Trump's policy aims.
And the public performance of it all was key too, wasn't it? The sources frame it less as just policy and more as this kind of spectacle.
It absolutely was a spectacle. Musk went from that initial distance, the criticism, to what one source calls full-throttle political support, just completely on board publicly. And President Trump, well, he's known for his rallies, his public persona. He responded in kind. He clearly embraced the spectacle of having the world's richest man, this tech icon, as a very public ally.
And this partnership, it then seemed to get kind of formalized, or at least institutionalized, in early 2025.
Yeah, in a very, very visible way. Trump appointed Musk to head up this brand new department, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
DOGE.
Yeah.
And the sources, they don't miss the chance to point out that the name, it sounds like a meme because, well, it basically was one, right? A nod to internet culture, very much fitting Musk's online persona.
Exactly. And as head of DOGE, the reports say he was given pretty much free rein to find ways to slash overhead, save taxpayer money, theoretically. And his actions in that role, extremely public, totally consistent with his online brand. He was live streaming audits, tweeting these cost-cutting charts to millions of followers, posting memes of bureaucrats, often calling them NPCs.
NPCs, non-playable characters, like background figures in a video game just following scripts. So he's painting government workers as these kind of rote, unthinking drones. And he had some seriously radical targets for cuts, didn't he? According to the sources.
He absolutely did. The sources detail these proposals, including a massive 75% reduction in the federal workforce.
35%.
Yeah. And a target of $2 trillion in cuts to federal spending overall. I mean, these were huge, headline-grabbing numbers that really fit that efficiency expert narrative he was pushing.
And while Musk is proposing these sweeping, almost revolutionary changes, Trump is clearly soaking up the political upside of the association. The sources detail these moments where he just seems to be basking in the glow of having Musk around.
Yeah, several specific examples pop up. There was that Mar-a-Lago fundraiser. Sources report Trump insisted the band play David Bowie's Space Oddity as a tribute to Musk. And he's musing to guests about, those rockets, they're just incredible, beautiful machines. It really felt, as one source puts it, less about the nitty-gritty policy of government efficiency and much more about the sort of dazzling association.
It wasn't policy, it was pageantry. That phrase really jumps out from the sources, capturing the feel of their bond during that peak time.
It really does. And they weren't just, working together formally. They were seen together all the time in public. The sources talk about them traveling together, going to UFC fights. They even mention Musk's son, XAA-12, showing up at White House events. For a while there, Musk took on this role that sources describe as almost first buddy.
First buddy.
Yeah. Unofficial, unfiltered, seemed to have direct access, constantly online, really blurring the lines between, Silicon Valley power and White House closeness.
That unofficial role seemed to carry a lot of weight, a lot of visibility. And then there's that now famous quote from Musk himself that just seemed to cement the public idea of this unbreakable bond.
Oh, yeah, that one. Musk posted on X, "I love at real Donald Trump as much as a straight man can love another man."
Right.
I mean, it was striking, definitely attention-grabbing, seemed designed to just erase any doubt about how deep his public political affection went at that point.
Absolutely. And the sources, they list off several other key moments that really illustrate just how embedded Musk seemed to become right at the highest levels. He spent election night at Mar-a-Lago. In his victory speech, Trump apparently pointed him out, called him a star is born.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
He was at the inauguration. There was that whole salute thing that caused a stir. He appeared with Trump and his son in the Oval Office, even joined a cabinet meeting.
Right, where Trump apparently introduced him, saying he was sacrificing a lot and kind of joked about how the agency heads weren't too happy with him, given Musk's whole cost-cutting mission.
Yeah. Though there was that moment in March, the sources note, where Trump did publicly tell the cabinet heads they were ultimately in charge of job cuts, not Musk. Maybe an early sign of needing to manage things a bit, even within the partnership.
Could be. A little bit of public boundary setting, perhaps?
And we can't forget that completely unprecedented moment, the White House lawn Tesla showroom, basically. March 11th. Trump sitting in a Tesla, Musk right there.
On the White House lawn.
Yeah, and announcing he intended to buy one. And this was happening even as Musk was facing some backlash globally for his political involvement, not just in the U.S. These examples, they just paint such a vivid picture of this very public, seemingly rock-solid partnership built on, well, mutual benefit, public spectacle, and, yeah, definitely a touch of pageantry.
It really shows that rapid arc, doesn't it? From distant critic to deeply embedded ally, the first buddy. But as the sources also make pretty clear, these kinds of alliances, built on maybe mutual flattery, political convenience, especially when you've got real policy differences maybe bubbling underneath, they can sometimes have a pretty short shelf life.
Yeah, good point. So let's pivot then. Let's look at what the sources identify as the policy static, the friction points, and the specific bill that seems to have been the trigger for this whole dramatic breakdown.
Okay, so the sources indicate that even when the bromance seemed at its peak, cracks were already starting to appear. There were these early tensions predating the big public blowup.
Like what? What were some of those early friction points?
Well, one notable area mentioned was this thing sources called the Magia Civil War over H-1B visas. That flared up in early 2025.
Right. H-1Bs, the visas for high-skilled foreign workers. The Trump administration was maybe looking at some limited reforms, streamlining things for high-skilled talent.
Something like that. But within the Magia base, particularly the hardline elements, this was apparently seen as a total betrayal of America first. You know, the idea of prioritizing foreign workers over American ones.
And Musk's position on this was, well, completely different from that nationalist view, wasn't it?
Fundamentally different. He was, and the sources point out, he's consistently been a really vocal advocate for bringing in and keeping top engineering and tech talent from all over the world. He defended the H-1B program, saying it was absolutely essential for American innovation, especially in those cutting-edge fields like AI, automotive tech, aerospace, basically, areas critical to his own companies.
So he's arguing from the perspective of needing the best global talent to keep the U.S. competitive, while a big chunk of the Magia base is looking at it purely through the lens of protecting American jobs, American borders. That puts him squarely at odds with that populist nationalist wing.
Exactly. It created this direct conflict. The sources describe hardline Trump allies, prominent right-wing influencers, publicly attacking Musk over this, accusing him of putting his corporate interests first ahead of national interests.
Right.
Social media, especially X, Musk's own platform, became this battleground. You had this Magia nationalist rhetoric clashing very openly with Musk's more techno-libertarian, global talent is good kind of view.
Okay, so H-1B visas were one point of tension. The sources mentioned another one involving tariffs.
Yes. Trade policy. The Trump administration kept pushing its trade approach, including this tariff framework designed to hit countries they saw as unfairly subsidizing exports coming into the U.S.
And Musk, his public stance on tariffs had also been critical in the past, right?
That's right. Sources recall him publicly warning that tariffs could actually hurt high-tech manufacturers like Tesla by making imported components more expensive, raising domestic production costs without necessarily helping U.S. innovation much. The sources specifically mention Peter Navarro's ongoing, long-standing feud with Musk over trade, with Navarro staying a very vocal critic of Musk's position.
So you've got these simmering policy disagreements kind of bubbling away, clashes with the Magia base on immigration, worries about trade policy hitting his businesses, friction with figures like Navarro, all happening while the whole public first buddy show is going on. But the sources pinpoint one specific piece of legislation as the real tipping point.
Yeah, that seems to be President Trump's signature one big beautiful bill, this huge sprawling tax and spending plan. It was a major legislative focus for him.
And from the viewpoint of many in the Magia world, this bill was like a major win, right?
Yeah.
Promised big middle-class tax cuts, significant deficit reduction, hitting key campaign promises.
Absolutely. That was the narrative from the administration and its supporters. But Musk, according to the sources, had some serious problems with key parts of it. And he particularly bristled at the cuts to clean energy incentives, especially the EV subsidies.
Electric vehicle subsidies. Okay, that hits close to home for Tesla.
Exactly. And his criticism of the bill became very public, and it ramped up significantly in early June 2025, right around the time he was leaving his formal government role.
He wasn't just offering, like, gentle suggestions for improvement. He attacked it pretty forcefully. The sources say he called the bill irresponsible, claimed it would actually increase the deficit.
Yeah, he branded it an outrageous, a disgusting abomination, even called it the Big Ugly Bill.
Wow, big ugly bill. That's quite a contrast to how Trump was describing it.
Night and day. Trump was repeatedly calling it one of the greatest bills ever, a record cut in expenses, $1.6 trillion, the biggest tax cut ever given. And he was warning, very ominously, that if it didn't pass, there'd be a 68% tax increase and things far worse.
So you had these two incredibly powerful guys who were just recently posing together, using completely opposite, extreme language to describe the president's signature legislative achievement. This public split on such a major policy, it seems like that triggered a kind of realization for Musk, based on how the sources frame it.
Yeah, the sources suggest this was the moment Musk maybe realized he'd gone from being this welcome insider, someone whose ideas or just presence was valuable, to potentially being an inconvenience. The bill had its supporters, the administration had its path set, and maybe, the sources imply, that public spectacle of the alliance just wasn't serving the same purpose anymore. Or maybe it was even becoming a liability for pushing this specific bill through. The bill, its supporters, maybe Trump himself, they just didn't need him in the same way anymore.
And this heavy public criticism, it really kicked off right after he officially left the administration. The sources mentioned Musk announced he was leaving government back in May 2025.
Right. He cited, according to the material, that his scheduled time as a special government employee heading DOGE was just finished.
And initially, there was this attempt to maintain a kind of public facade around it, at least from the White House side. Trump reportedly praised him on his last day, called him one of the greatest business leaders, even gave him a symbolic key to the White House.
Yeah, the public pleasantries. But the sources strongly suggest that the tensions were definitely already simmering beneath that surface.
For sure. I mean, the timing of Musk's really intense criticism of the bill, starting almost the second he walked out the door, it indicates those policy disagreements were pretty significant.
Definitely. Sources even quote Musk's own father denying there was a rift just before everything blew up, but also commenting that his son wasn't a very good politician, maybe hinting that Musk struggled with navigating the complexities and compromises of the political world compared to running his companies.
Yeah, interesting point. So you've got these building policy tensions. It all comes to a head over this massive bill. Musk leaves, immediately starts blasting the bill publicly,
Yeah.
all setting the stage for that spectacular public flameout on June 5th, 2025.
And the setting for this escalation, as the sources describe it, couldn't have been more formal, really. It was a joint press conference President Trump was holding with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the White House.
Right, high profile.
And it was there, in that setting, that Trump gets asked directly about his relationship with his former advisor, Elon Musk.
That phrasing alone, former advisor, probably highlighted the shift right there. And Trump's initial response, captured in those public remarks the sources detail, it was incredibly revealing.
It really was. He started off acknowledging, okay, we had a great relationship, but then immediately pivoted, don't know if we will anymore.
Wow.
He said he was surprised by Musk's recent criticism, stated he was very disappointed in Elon, framing it not just as a policy disagreement, but as a personal letdown.
And he didn't waste time getting to the substance of the disagreement, making a very specific and pretty controversial claim about Musk's involvement with that big bill.
Yes, Trump claimed Musk knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody in that room, including the reporters. Okay. He alleged Musk knew everything about it, implying Musk had detailed knowledge, maybe even input. And crucially, Trump claimed that initially Musk had no problem with it.
So Trump's painting this picture. Musk was fully briefed, maybe even involved, accepted the bill initially, and then Trump offered a specific reason, his reason, for Musk's sudden U-turn.
Exactly. Trump alleged the problem only started, Musk's criticism only began, when Musk found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate.
The electric vehicle mandate cut.
Right. Trump claimed that specific cut was what Musk saw as unfair, involving billions and billions of dollars, directly tying Musk's opposition to a financial motive linked to Tesla rather than the deficit concerns Musk himself had raised publicly.
He also offered a kind of broader, more personal theory about Musk's motives, drawing on his own history with people who'd left his administration.
Yeah, he speculated that Musk just misses being in government, suggested he miss it so badly, and he compared Musk's behavior to others who leave his team and then become critical, hostile.
Yeah.
This is where Trump reportedly used that term Trump derangement syndrome to describe this pattern, implying it's this irrational hostility born from longing for the power and glamour of being in his circle.
And he made sure to slip in that he felt he'd helped Musk out a lot, maybe referencing things like promoting Teslas at the White House, implying Musk was being ungrateful.
And he doubled down on his timeline, stating very clearly that Musk never had a problem with the bill until right after he left. So the narrative from Trump was, Musk's criticism was sudden, surprising, motivated by money, and maybe sour grapes about no longer being an insider.
Okay, so that's Trump's side, laid out at the press conference. What happened next, according to the sources, was almost immediate, and it played out mainly on Musk's turf, on X, in real time.
It was just this dramatic, multi-pronged counterattack. Musk immediately started firing back directly at Trump's claims, using X like a live fact-check or counter-narrative machine.
Right.
When Trump claimed Musk knew the bill inside out, Musk just posted one single word: false.
Just false. But he didn't leave it there, did he? He offered his own explanation for why he couldn't have known the details.
Exactly. He claimed the bill was never shown to me even once, directly contradicting Trump. And he added that it was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could even read it, painting the whole legislative process for the bill as murky, rushed, making detailed knowledge impossible for anyone, let alone him.
Then he broadened his attack, going beyond just his one bill, hitting Trump's wider economic policies.
Yeah, he posted that Trump's tariffs, which we talked about earlier as a tension point, he predicted they will cause a recession in the second half of this year, adding this big economic forecast and criticism into the mix.
And then the attacks just got even more politically charged, more personal, culminating in a really extraordinary claim about the election.
Yeah, this was bold. Musk posted, straight up claiming credit for Trump's recent election win. Said, without me, Trump would have lost the election, Dems would control the House, and the Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. Basically asserting that his political activity, his huge donation, were the deciding factors in the national election outcome.
That's quite a claim for a private citizen. But he went even further, didn't he? Directly challenging Trump's integrity with that really provocative, unsubstantiated accusation about the Epstein files.
Yeah, this was probably the most explosive moment detailed in the sources. Musk suggested publicly on X that Trump appears in the Epstein files, and then added that is the real reason they have not been made public.
Geez.
He told people, mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. Now, it's absolutely critical to stress, as the sources do, Musk offered zero evidence for this specific claim linking Trump to the unreleased parts of those files.
Right. No proof offered. And yet, the accusation itself is just incredibly potent, isn't it? Why is that?
Yeah. Well, the sources explain it taps right into all the existing public fascination, the conspiracy theories swirling around the full contents of the Epstein files. So, by throwing that accusation out there, Musk was basically weaponizing public curiosity and suspicion. It was a deeply damaging personal attack that would resonate with certain online groups, whether there was proof or not.
Yeah.
The sources do mention that, yes, previously released documents did name Trump mentioned a meeting at a casino, him calling Epstein a terrific guy before they apparently fell out. But there were no accusations of wrongdoing by Trump in those released files. Musk's claim went way beyond that, suggesting Trump was the reason for the secrecy.
It certainly escalated things dramatically. And Musk kept going. He even backed a call for impeachment.
He did. Sources say he shared someone else's post calling for Trump's impeachment and just added his own. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, talk about a complete 180 from being his biggest donor and supporter.
Unbelievable. And in the middle of all this chaos, he even threw out this radical political idea, kind of testing the waters.
Yeah, he launched a poll on X, asked his millions of followers if it was time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle. And the sources note it got huge engagement, lots of encouragement for him to actually do it, suggesting, with his wealth and platform, maybe independent political action isn't out of the question for him.
And he even dragged one of his key businesses, SpaceX, into the public fight, making a threat.
Briefly, yes. Responding to Trump's threats about canceling contracts, Musk posted that SpaceX would start decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately.
Dragon being the only U.S. spacecraft taking astronauts to the ISS right now.
Exactly. The sources note he apparently backed down from that threat pretty quickly, just hours later, probably realizing the implications. But the fact he'd even tweet that publicly just shows how heated, maybe how impulsive these exchanges were becoming in real time.
So you've got Musk's absolute barrage on X denials, recession predictions, claiming he won the election for Trump, that explosive Epstein accusation, supporting impeachment, floating a new party, threatening space infrastructure. Meanwhile, Trump wasn't just sitting back. He hit back on his platform, Truth Social.
Oh, yeah, his counterattack escalated things too. More personal attacks, more counterclaims. Trump claimed on Truth Social that Elon was wearing thin when he was in government, and significantly, he claimed, I asked him to leave.
Which directly contradicts Musk saying he left when his scheduled time was up.
Directly. And Trump hammered his point again about the EV mandate cut being the real reason for the conflict.
Right.
He posted, I took away his EV mandate that he knew for months I was going to do, and he just went crazy. Painting Musk's reaction as purely about that policy and calling him irrational just went crazy. And this is the claim Musk, as we noted, publicly called an obvious lie.
Trump also kept defending his big bill against Musk's attack.
Doubled down, called it one of the greatest bills ever again, repeated the claims about record spending cuts, $1.6 trillion, biggest tax cut ever, warned again about that 68% tax increase if it failed, directly refuting Musk's claim it would increase the deficit.
And then came the biggest escalation from Trump's side, the direct threats using government power.
Yeah, this was significant. The sources detailed Trump threatening to terminate federal contracts and subsidies for Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink, claiming this would save the government billions and billions of dollars. This really shifted the fight from just insults and conflicting stories into the territory of potentially using the state's power to inflict serious financial damage on Musk's empire.
The sources also mention a few other things happening around this time that show how wide the fallout was spreading.
Right. Musk was reportedly unfollowing some prominent right-wing figures on X, people seen as being firmly in Trump's camp, like Stephen Miller, Charlie Kirk. And that long-simmering mutual dislike with Peter Navarro flared up again publicly, with Musk apparently calling Navarro a moron. These smaller incidents just highlighted how the fracture wasn't just between the two main guys. It was rippling out, affecting relationships across that whole political and tech world.
So you just have this incredibly intense, multi-platform explosion. Accusations, counter-accusations, wild claims, direct threats, all playing out in just a matter of hours on June 5th. It's a truly remarkable, raw display of conflict between two of the most powerful men on the planet. Now let's dig into what the sources tell us about the fallout, the immediate costs, the potential consequences down the line, and how different people reacted.
Well, the economic impact, according to the sources, was immediate and pretty stark, especially for Tesla.
Yeah, the sources report Tesla's stock just tanked, fell 14.3% just on Thursday, June 5th, the day this all really erupted.
That one-day drop, material says, wiped somewhere between $122 billion and $150 billion off Tesla's market value.
Just gone, in a day.
Yeah. And for Elon Musk personally, sources estimate this whole period, the fallout from the feud, has meant a massive hit to his net worth. Potentially over $100 billion lost since the peak of the bromance and his holdings' highest valuation.
And it wasn't just Tesla feeling the heat, right? Sources note other assets linked to Trump also took a hit, though maybe smaller.
That's right. Trump Media and Technology Group, DJT, his social media company stock, reportedly fell 8%, and Trump's own cryptocurrency dropped 12%. It suggests the market really didn't like seeing this public war break out between them, maybe worried about the implications for their linked interests.
One of the biggest potential financial hits highlighted in the sources, though, is the threat to SpaceX, given Trump explicitly threatened to cancel contracts.
Yeah, the potential loss for SpaceX is huge, although the sources frame it as a kind of theoretical maximum based on contracts already in place. They really emphasize how much the U.S. government relies on SpaceX now.
Right.
Federal data cited shows almost $21 billion already paid or promised to SpaceX since 2008 for all sorts of things.
And the potential value of contracts already signed but not yet paid out is even bigger.
Much bigger. According to the sources, the total potential value of existing long-term contracts SpaceX holds is $89.2 billion. So if Trump actually followed through on his threat and canceled all of them, That's a theoretical maximum hit of $68 billion in lost potential future income for SpaceX.
$68 billion. Just putting that in context, the sources note that's more than 4 times SpaceX's forecasted revenue for 2025, and like 15 times its reported revenue from just a couple of years ago. It just underlines the sheer scale of the government's business with SpaceX and what's potentially on the line here.
And this heavy reliance, it's led some critics mentioned in the sources to argue SpaceX basically has a monopoly in some critical areas, like getting U.S. astronauts to space, launching heavy government satellites. And that concentration, they argue, could theoretically make SpaceX vulnerable, even to extreme government actions like, expropriation or nationalization, if a president really decided to go to the absolute limit in using state power against the company. Though, again, the sources present that as a kind of speculative worst-case scenario.
Still, it highlights how deeply tangled Musk's companies are with government, not just federally, but state level too, right? Sources mention Tesla relies on state support.
Yeah, they point to things like those emission trading payments from states over $11 billion since 2007, and estimated consumer tax credits for buying EVs worth maybe $3.4 billion. These incentivize Tesla sales.
Right.
And the sources also note that Trump and other Republicans have actively tried to undermine or kill some of those state-level clean energy programs. So that adds another layer of potential regulatory pressure on Tesla even before this whole feud blew up.
And speaking of regulatory pressure, the sources make a really important point about the significant pre-existing risks Tesla faced coming into Trump's second term.
That's key. The sources remind us, before this feud, before Trump was even back in office, Tesla was already facing ongoing investigations from multiple federal agencies. They specifically list the Justice Department, the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, which alone had 6 pending safety probes open.
So the sources frame Trump's willingness to wield state power as this kind of double-edged sword in his relationship with Musk.
Exactly. When Musk was in government, sources say some Trump allies worried Musk might use his DOGE position to influence or maybe even shut down those investigations into Tesla.
Oh, okay.
Now, with the feud, the dynamic flips completely. Musk faces the potential weaponization of those exact same regulatory powers against his company by an administration that's openly threatening payback.
That's a really tangible risk coming straight out of this conflict.
Right.
Was there any potential positive economic note mentioned in the sources amid all this financial chaos?
Just one small specific thing. The sources mention that the feud, by possibly reducing Musk's perceived political influence or focus, actually raised hopes among advertisers.
Advertisers on X.
Yeah. Hopes that the lawsuits Musk had been pursuing against companies that stopped advertising on X might be eased up or dropped, now that he might have less political weight behind him. Kind of a niche point, but maybe a small silver lining for some companies.
Okay. Let's shift to the political impact. The sources note this whole implosion is particularly tricky for one specific group within the conservative movement.
They call this group the tech right. Basically, conservative entrepreneurs, VCs, online personalities who've aligned themselves with Trump. Their position gets complicated because, well, many feel a sense of loyalty or gratitude to Musk for buying X for what they see as freeing up speech online.
Right.
But they're also aligned with President Trump, so they're kind of caught between these two giants who are now at war.
And there's the very practical, immediate financial threat to Trump's own political machine, too.
Yes, absolutely. The feud puts that final $100 million slice of Musk's promised $300 million donation at risk. That's a huge chunk of change that would definitely impact ongoing Republican campaign activities.
We saw reactions from all over the Manchier world, documented in the sources, kind of reflecting this difficult position.
Yeah, the sources detail a range of responses. Laura Loomer apparently stressed Trump's legacy is eternal, suggested the fight should move offline, but also noted that lawmakers were literally asking themselves who to side with, framing it as the most powerful man versus the richest man.
Right. Expert speaker.
Yeah.
Steve Bannon, who was never really a Musk fan even during the alliance, was reportedly telling Trump to go all out, cancel the contracts, launch investigations, just full attack mode.
Then you had Charlie Kirk, who, despite the fighting, reportedly expressed ongoing gratitude to Musk for the X takeover and liberating free speech as he saw it.
Well, Candace Owens reportedly said she wasn't surprised by Musk's actions, and she criticized people in the movement she felt had put him on too high a pedestal, worshipped him.
And Pauly Sipula offered maybe a more nuanced view documented in the sources. Acknowledged the bill had good parts, but didn't go far enough. blamed the uniparty establishment for problems and said he didn't really blame either Trump or Elon for the feud itself, saw it more as a symptom of this bigger systemic issue.
These different reactions from within the MAGA world, laid out in the sources, they really highlight the internal splits, don't they? The conflicting loyalties, the different ways people are interpreting this feud, and what it means for the movement.
Definitely. Congressional reactions are noted too. Senator J.D. Vance reportedly came down firmly on Trump's side, and the sources mention Musk himself suggesting publicly on X that his actions, his influence, could maybe impact the future careers of politicians who don't back him, which, given his money and platform, is another layer of political pressure in this whole mess.
And the sources point to one specific action the Trump administration took just days after the feud erupted that seems directly linked.
Yeah, pulling Jared Isaacman's NASA nomination. Isaacman is described in the sources as a close friend of Musk's. The timing strongly suggests this was direct payback, hitting someone close to Musk because of the falling out between him and the president.
And going back to Musk's poll about a new political party, combined with his wealth, his history of spending big on politics, it does raise that question, noted in the sources, about whether he might actually try to go his own way now, finance his own party or movement if he feels like the existing system after this clash doesn't represent him.
It's a possibility. Beyond the markets and the political games, there are some pretty significant government and personal stakes that have been dragged out into the open, too. Like we mentioned, Steve Bannon is reportedly pushing for investigations into Musk on several specific fronts.
Like his immigration status. The sources bring up that old Washington Post report alleging Musk might have worked illegally back in the 90s before getting citizenship.
Right. And Bannon's apparently pushing for an investigation based on a rarely used law that could, theoretically, lead to citizenship revocation if it was found he lied back then. Sources note Musk became a citizen in 2002. Bannon's also reportedly pushing for probes into Musk's alleged drug use, specifically mentioning things like ecstasy, Adderall, ketamine, magic mushrooms.
Wow. And also his security clearance and how he handled sensitive data at DOGE.
Exactly. Questioning whether he should retain clearance needed for government contracts and what sensitive information he might have accessed heading the Department of Government Efficiency.
And then there's Musk's own bombshell accusation about Trump being in the Epstein files as the real reason they aren't public. Again, the sources are crystal clear. Musk provided zero evidence for that specific claim about Trump and the unreleased files.
Zero evidence offered by Musk. But as the sources highlight, the accusation itself is powerful because it plugs right into that existing public narrative, the speculation, the suspicion around the Epstein case, and what might still be hidden. It allowed Musk to land this really visible, damaging personal blow against Trump by linking him to Epstein regardless of proof, leveraging that public fascination. As we said, earlier released files did name Trump, but no wrongdoing was alleged on his part in those.
It just shows the lengths both sides seem willing to go to, using these really potent, even if unproven, attacks in the heat of this digital war.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the sources offer a kind of framework for understanding the core dynamic here.
Yeah, the material suggests looking at it through this lens of, well, maybe the gospel of ego. It paints the conflict as being fundamentally about two massive egos, two men who, maybe in their own minds, see themselves as these singular protagonists of American destiny. Each thinks they hold the key to the country's future. And in that view, neither could ultimately stand sharing the spotlight or tolerate the other's independence or different priorities. Trump, maybe he wanted a loyal industrialist who'd just follow orders. Musk, maybe he wanted a blank check and total freedom to do things his way, no political interference. The sources suggest neither really got what they wanted from the deal, and that's what led to this massive collision.
That gospel of ego idea provides a really interesting lens for viewing the sheer personal intensity of this spat, even alongside the very real policy and economic issues involved. So let's try to connect the dots here. We've traced the whole arc based on the sources from distance to deep alliance, through policy friction, and then this absolutely spectacular public implosion starting June 5th.
Yeah, we've looked at the stated reasons for the split, mostly centered on that one big, beautiful bill. The EV mandate cuts, which Trump pinpointed as the core issue, versus Musk's stated concerns about the deficit, energy incentives, the bill's overall impact.
And we've put those stated policy fights alongside the really personal dynamics the sources emphasize. Trump's talk of personal disappointment, feeling Musk was wearing thin, the sense of gratitude, the clear clash of massive egos. Trump speculated Musk missed the glamour of the White House using terms like Trump derangement syndrome.
Right. And based purely on the sources you've shared, it's really up to you, the listener, to weigh which factors seem to have played the bigger role in this incredibly fast, dramatic collapse. Was it fundamentally about policy? Or was it more about the personalities, the egos, the personal dynamics between these two incredibly powerful men? The sources offer evidence pointing in both directions.
And this whole deep dive, drawing just from the sources provided, it really underscores that challenge of navigating information overload when big stories like this break in real time. You have these completely conflicting claims being thrown around publicly by the main players themselves.
Totally. Musk knew the bill inside out versus he never even saw it. Trump asked Musk to leave versus Musk left on schedule. The motive was EV mandates versus it was deficit concerns.
Exactly. Helping you cut through that noise, understand the key claims and counterclaims, see the documented fallout. That's really the goal here. And it matters to you, the listener, for very concrete reasons.
Absolutely. This isn't just some detached drama about billionaires and presidents. The sources show real, tangible consequences. The immediate hit to major companies like Tesla and SpaceX companies tied deeply to the U.S. economy, to innovation, even to critical government functions like getting us to space.
Yeah, it vividly demonstrates that potent mix, that intersection of huge private wealth and power with government policy, with regulation, with massive government contracts. It gives you insight into the dynamics inside a major political movement, the MAGA world, as people try to figure out their loyalties when two huge allies suddenly turn on each other.
And it shows, just starkly, how social media becomes the main battlefield for these powerful figures, launching accusations, including potentially damaging unproven ones like the Epstein claim, straight into the public conversation. And it raises those serious questions about the potential use or threat of state power against political enemies, a risk that, as the sources show, can cut both ways depending on who's in charge.
So bringing together all those different perspectives from the sources, the financial analysts talking market losses, the political commentators looking at the GOP and tech rate implications, the journalists detailing the specific back-and-forth accusations, that framing about the personal dynamics and ego, it helps build a much more complete picture of what's really going on, helps synthesize all the complexity.
It's definitely a complex story. A remarkably fast collapse of what looked like a strong alliance, layers of policy conflict, deep personal drama, huge power dynamics, and a whole lot of public performance art, all crammed into a very short, very intense period.
It is. We've covered the sheer speed and intensity of this. Well, digital divorce, as some called it, and the significant fallout, the sources document. It's clearly a story that's still unfolding, and we probably won't know the full implications for quite some time.
Sure.
So, as you think about everything we've discussed today, based only on the material you provided us, maybe consider this. What does this specific clash between these two individuals with such immense power and influence tell us about the future? The future of politics, of business, the whole relationship between powerful people and the state, particularly in the U.S. Does it reveal something fundamental about political loyalty, about power dynamics, about just how much personality can shape events, even at the very highest levels? And maybe the most important question for all of us.
Yeah.
How should we, as listeners, as citizens, trying to make sense of this constant flood of information and accusation? How should we evaluate claims made in the heat of a public battle like this one? Definitely something to chew on.